Hello everyone and welcome back to DMG. Not too long ago I looked at the XPS M1710, a very high performance laptop from around 2007, although it did have some caveats that kept me from recommending it. What I have for you today is a bit odd, and I'd say it solves all of the XPS M1710's problems, that is if it wasn't so hard to find. This is the HP Compaq NW9440. It is an ultra high-end, ultra high performance desktop replacement mobile workstation mouthful from around the same era. The Compaq NW series is the rather hard to find predecessor to the HP EliteBook, which is of course the predecessor to the HP ZBook. They only used this chassis for one generation. No other laptop shares this particular chassis. There is a first generation EliteBook that is rather similar, but these are actually pretty uncommon, actually less common than the XPS M1710. And that's really unfortunate because this is absolutely fantastic. Probably one of the best old, high performance laptops I've used. So let's take a look at it, as always starting with the ports on the front here. Two speakers that are actually better than the XPS M1710s. Big card reader. It has one of the the normal SD card slot, and then what are they called? Smart media. Yeah, the cards that are like that wide. And that's not common on a laptop. I doubt anyone would need that, but if you do, it has a smart media card reader. On the right side, headphone, microphone, two USB 2, LightScribe DVD rewriter, and 10100, unfortunately, LAN. On the back here is the battery. It's a 66 watt hour, and it runs this machine for about 45 minutes to an hour. That's a pretty big downside with big laptops like this. Then you have two vents. One of these is just for the GPU, and one of those is just for the CPU. So they keep it quieter by only having one fan that blows through two separate vents to separately cool the CPU and the graphics. I always like that design. And on this side, we have, of course, the vent, charging port, over 135 watt chargers, or actually no, over 120 watt, VGA, S-Video, and two more USB 2, FireWire 400, smart card reader, and PCMCIA slot. So let's open it up here. This screen is very thick. It's probably one of the thickest screens I've ever seen. Its bezels, however, are not. You can kind of see, yeah, it actually has remarkably thin bezels, but this display is 1920 by 1200. It's a semi-gloss coating, so it's not full matte, which is interesting. It still has some of the color and contrast advantages of a glossy display, but you can actually use it in a room that is not 100% dark. However, the rest of this laptop is very different from the M1710 in everything but its size and specs. Of course, it's not flashy. It doesn't have all the RGB, the special lights, and all of that. This is a business laptop. Let's go ahead and fire it up here. So I mentioned that the battery runtime is pretty short, even for a laptop of this era. Luckily, there is a solution for that. This is the HP Extended Battery Slice, and it is a 95 watt hour battery that clips onto the bottom of the notebook. It has vents on it so that it doesn't block the fan intake, which is excellent. But it adds about an hour and a half of runtime. And to attach it, you just slide this little door open, and then it clips onto the back. It adds about 1.5 pounds to the laptop, a little less. But honestly, if you're already using a 17-inch laptop, 2 pounds will not matter at all. It also gives the keyboard a nice ergonomic typing angle, so sometimes I clip it on even if the battery's completely flat, just because I like how much it raises up the keyboard. And this is not the only model of laptop this battery works on. It works through, it's like the 3rd generation Core series. So this is a pretty versatile battery. but it is definitely the most helpful on this laptop, which just eats through battery because of its specifications. It unfortunately uses the earlier socket used for Core Duo and Core 2 Duo processors. That is socket M. And that means you can't quite push it as high on the Core 2 Duo clock speeds. If you go with a 64-bit Core 2 Duo, you're limited to a T9400. As far as the graphics go, this comes from the factory with a Quadro FX 1500M. But there's something very special about this Quadro FX 1500M. It's factory overclocked, and not just by like 12 megahertz. It is factory overclocked by 20 freaking percent on the core and the memory. So it blows away the stock reference edition FX 1500M that was used in the Dell Precision M90 and the one that I've installed in my XPS M1710 back there. It's about the performance of a GeForce 7900 mobile card. However, the slot is MXM. It is just a regular MXM slot, opposed to the proprietary slot that Dell used in the XPS. Therefore, you can put pretty much whatever the hell you want in there. I got it working with a Quadro FX 880M, and that is, it's a slightly newer card, better supported in Windows 10, much more power efficient, and it worked great, but I do have the Quadro FX 1500 back in because its overclocked nature makes it a really interesting card. But if your graphics card dies, like my XPS M1710 did, you can actually replace it with something not only the same, but also better. Which, of course, with Dell's proprietary slot, you're limited to like the 4 graphics cards they offered on that one specific laptop model. But here, you can put in, there's probably like 50, 60 different cards that would work in here, and they're not all made by HP, and they're probably cheaper on eBay. So anyway, I don't need to explain this, but open standards are better. This display, my only complaint with it is that it doesn't get very bright. I like the resolution, and the colors are okay. They're not as good as the XPS M1710, because it does have that like semi-gloss finish that's not quite as striking. Like its colors are a tiny bit less vivid than the XPS M1710, although they both aren't particularly great displays by modern standards, so there's really not too much comparison between them. Actually, some things do look better on this display than the M1710. It all depends on ambient lighting, though. It eats a lot of power, it gets very hot, but it looks great, the display. And the resolution of 1920 by 1200, I mean, absolutely fantastic. That's really the main appeal of big-ass laptops like this for me. It's the ridiculous resolution that you can't get on a modern laptop. And yes, of course you can get like similar resolutions, but the 16 by 10 aspect ratio I prefer. But without any further ado, it looks like it's finished its little operation. So let's do a little testing. Of course, there's a Windows update now. Well, let's look at the viewing angles on the display. And I'll turn it down a little so it doesn't blind the camera. So up and down viewing angles are where it suffers the most. You do lose some contrast, particularly going to the left. It gets really dark, but to the right, mainly fine. Up and down is really where you get the weird colors and stuff. Again, no display of this era is very good when it comes to viewing angles, and unfortunately that applies to like super high-end laptops too. Above the keyboard you do get a nice row of function keys. This one just like tells you the processor info, how much memory you have. It's like a system information kind of button, which I don't know why that needs a button. wireless on and off. This features a first generation Centrino platform, so that's 3945 ABG card, not the newest of cards. If you don't have an 802.11 in or newer like network, you'll be just fine. But if your like wireless router or access point doesn't support 802.11g or below, not good. You will have to swap out the card, but it doesn't seem like there is a BIOS whitelist because I've tried like 4 different cards, they all worked fine. Go back to the front here, of course, numlock and caps lock indicators and volume up and down buttons. Key that launches the calculator app, which, I mean, it sounds stupid, but I've actually used it. At least I've used it a lot more than the "what processor do I have" button. As usual, we'll start with a keyboard test. Actually, the laptop is on. You can't tell. The viewing angles are pretty bad on this display. And there we go. So, keyboard, very little deck flex. It's a little loud, but not in a clacky way. It's just a loud keyboard, you know what I mean? There is a decent amount of tactile feel. The keys have more resistance than some other laptops of this era, but in general, it's a pretty solid keyboard, comparable to most other business laptops. It does have a point stick and a set of 3 buttons below the keyboard, and for whatever reason I really don't like that they've done this. Instead of a middle mouse button on the bottom set of buttons next to the touchpad, they've put a fingerprint reader there where the middle mouse button should go. Why would you need it there? It could be here, it could be here, it could be here, or there, or like, hell, put it up here. No one needs to use a fingerprint reader as frequently as they do the mouse buttons. So that is the only choice that I dislike here. Now, I said the speakers were pretty good, and they're not only good for a business laptop, they're just good overall. The actual speakers themselves cover the whole front. The drivers themselves are pretty small, but there is a lot of space for them to resonate. So they actually end up sounding quite good. So I guess Windows Media Player is just going to be open now. Oh, there we go. It's gone. So I think they sound great. Of course, a little high on the high mids and the treble, to be expected from laptop speakers in general. Definitely better than most other business laptop speakers and better than some consumer laptop speakers. Okay, now to that overclocked graphics card. And we're going to do some things that this laptop was never built for. Unfortunately, laptops of this era in general are not a good choice for modern CAD applications. So if you're looking to do any sort of 3D modeling, this graphics card can't do it. And I want to make that abundantly clear. It's a bit unfortunate, but of course newer editors just don't support those older APIs, and also it's really lacking in video memory. When you get the viewing angles right, the colors of the screen are actually pretty great. Of course, this flickering is not present in person. I've tried my best to eliminate it with camera settings, but nothing fully makes it go away. So for a non-glossy screen, it looks pretty decent. I think you can kind of see contrast is quite solid. Of course, CCFL backlight, I think I've mentioned that, but oh, hello Pikachu. Nerd. Okay, So yes, CCFL backlight gets very hot, uses a lot of power, but I think I've said this in the past, but I'll say it again. I am so glad that this does not use LED, because when LED displays first started coming to laptops, like LED backlights, they pretty much all looked horrendous. Really blue, really washed out colors. So a CCFL is very, very preferable in terms of display quality if you can put up with the much higher power usage. So of course it runs excellently here. We'll try the very, very demanding map. And this is at the maximum settings. This is the best I have ever seen IceTomb run on any laptop. Ever. This is 1920 by 1200, keep in mind, and this card is powering through it like a beast. This is far better performance than the desktop GeForce 6800, while the Quadro FX 1500M, the non-HP overclocked version, performs about like a GeForce 6800. This one is really surpassing that performance. I mean, this is almost a solid 60 frames a second. In fact, I'm seeing some screen tearing occasionally, which means we are getting over 60 frames a second. So actually mind-blowing performance. I've never seen anything run IceTomb this good, except for, like, of course, far newer hardware that's just more powerful. But for a laptop of the era, it's remarkable. It's just a fun thing that the Quadro is overclocked at all, because NVIDIA would not allow that nowadays. Quadros have to be built to NVIDIA's exact specifications. They are sacred. You're not allowed to, well, for a while you weren't even allowed to overclock your own Quadro that you bought. Nowadays the BIOSes are a bit more unlocked, but until the RTX series, I believe, you couldn't even overclock a Quadro, like, with MSI Afterburner. Anyway, this is running really well. Well, that's the HP Compaq NW9440 mobile workstation, an extremely massive machine with performance better than the XPS M1710, better upgradability, but unfortunately lower sturdiness and a higher price because they're a little more rare. When I say lower sturdiness, I didn't mention this before, but the entire chassis is completely plastic and there is not a metal frame inside. The XPS M1710 has a frame, part of it is metal, part of it is plastic, but once you get into the 17-inch range, you absolutely need a frame. There is some semblance of a frame here, but it is plastic, it doesn't cover the entire body, and it feels a little flimsy, honestly. So I dislike that it doesn't feel nearly as durable as the Dell XPS, which, in fact, the whole bottom of it is metal, while everything on this laptop is plastic. But it wins out in every other category. It wins in the performance, especially. It wins in the keyboard, wins in the sound, even though it doesn't have a discrete subwoofer. So, absolutely, I would recommend this, because if you need Windows 10 compatibility, you can put in a GeForce 8000 series or above that is Windows 10 compatible. Hell, you can put in an ATI card, put in whatever GPU you need, unlike the Dell XPS. Also easier to replace a failed card. You don't really lose much versus the XPS in terms of the screen. It is a little less bright and it doesn't have the glossy finish of the M1710, but the color reproduction is honestly about the same. So yes, in short, I do really like this laptop. I have been using it whenever I need something with a massive screen, and, well, it does a great job at that. But that's where I'm going to wrap it up for this video. So thank you everyone so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope that if you did, that you'll come back next time.